I've always loved camping alone. Something about being isolated from the noise and chaos of the city brought me peace. This time I picked a remote forest a few hours outside of town. It was perfect. No cell service, no other campers, just me, the trees, and the quiet. I set up camp deep in the woods, far enough from the trail so that no one would casually stumble upon my sight. The sun was low, casting long shadows between the trees as I pitched my tent and got a fire going. It was the kind of peaceful evening I was hoping for, with the sounds of nature all around me. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I settled down next to the fire, listening to the crackle of the flames and the soft chirping of crickets. I had a thermos of coffee and a good book with me, completely content to spend the evening under the stars. But as the night grew darker, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Being alone in the woods can do that. But then I heard it. A twig snapping in the distance. I paused, listening carefully. It could have been a deer, maybe a raccoon, but it sounded closer than I'd like for an animal to be. I shone my flashlight into the trees but didn't see anything, just darkness and the outline of branches swaying in the wind. Shrugging it off, I returned to my spot by the fire, trying to convince myself that I was just being paranoid. An hour passed, and the woods were silent again, save for the occasional rustle of leaves. I decided to turn in for the night, putting out the fire and climbing into my tent. As I zipped it closed, that uneasy feeling crept back over me. I shook it off and laid down on my sleeping bag, pulling it up to my chest. I must have dozed off at some point, but I woke up with a start. My eyes snapped open, and I was immediately aware of how still everything was. No wind, no crickets, nothing. Just silence. That's when I heard it. A slow, deliberate, scraping sound right outside my tent. My heart began to race, each beat thudding loudly in my chest. I held my breath, barely daring to move, straining to hear every detail. The sound was close, uncomfortably close. It was as if someone was slowly dragging their hand along the fabric of my tent, creating a soft, unsettling noise. I didn't dare move a muscle. I stayed completely still, silently praying that whatever was out there would just leave. But it didn't stop. The sound persisted, moving around the tent in slow, deliberate circles. It was steady, and it wasn't going away. I forced myself to sit up, my body trembling with fear. My hands were shaking uncontrollably as I fumbled for the flashlight beside me. My fingers barely gripped it as I managed to click it on. The beam of light flickered as I pointed it toward the zipper of the tent. Instantly, the sound stopped. Everything went quiet. I froze, holding my breath, my heart hammering in my chest. I waited, straining to hear anything, but there was only silence. Cautiously, I unzipped the tent just a few inches and shined the light outside. I expected to see nothing, maybe an animal scurrying off into the woods, but instead, I saw them. Eyes. From the edge of the trees, a pair of eyes stared directly at me. They didn't blink. They were cold, unmoving, locked onto me. The beam of my flashlight caught them, making them glow eerily in the darkness. But the rest of the figure, whoever it was, remained hidden, cloaked in the deep shadows of the forest. My stomach knotted with dread as the awful realization hit me. Those weren't the eyes of an animal. No, they belonged to a person. Someone was out there, silently watching me. I yanked myself back into the tent, my body moving before I could even think. My hands shook as I fumbled with the zipper, frantically pulling it all the way to the top. Once it was closed, I sat frozen in place, too scared to move a muscle. I didn't dare make a sound. All I could do was hope, pray, that whoever, or whatever, was out there would lose interest and leave me alone. But then it started again, that awful scraping sound. This time it was slower, more deliberate. It was as if someone was carefully tracing the edge of the tent with their fingers, dragging them along the fabric in a chilling rhythm. My pulse thundered in my ears, each beat growing louder, faster. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out of there as fast as I could, but fear rooted me to the spot. My hand clenched around the can of bear spray, gripping it so tightly that my knuckles turned white. It was my only defense, but even holding it didn't make me feel any safer. The sound stopped once more, and then a voice, soft, almost a whisper, right outside the tent flap.
Let me in.
I don't think I've ever moved that fast before in my life. Driven by pure terror, I fumbled for the zipper with trembling hands, yanking it open as quickly as I could. In a blind panic, I threw myself out of the tent, stumbling into the dark night with the bear spray gripped tightly in my hand. My heart raced, and I was ready to fight for my life, adrenaline pumping through every inch of my body. But when I finally looked around, there was nothing, no one. The forest around me was completely still, eerily quiet. The trees stood tall and motionless, their branches barely moving in the night air. There were no eyes peering at me from the shadows, no figure lurking nearby. I was alone. The silence was deafening, and the sense of dread clung to me like a heavy weight. I didn't wait to find out what was going on. I grabbed my backpack and ran, not caring where, just away from that tent. I didn't stop until I reached the car, adrenaline pushing me faster than I thought possible. I never looked back. I haven't gone camping since, and I don't think I ever will. But every now and then when I'm alone in the dark, I swear I can still hear it, faint and far away.